Chicago.
Tonight, 2020 Driehaus Awards for Investigative Reporting, Truth Revealed.
5 finalists.
New this year, Reader's Choice Award. Stop the Presses, winners announced tonight.
Welcome to the 2020 Richard H. Driehaus Awards for Investigative Reporting. Here's your host, David Greising.
Welcome to the 2020 Richard H. Driehaus Foundation Investigative Journalism Awards. For the Better Government Association, it is a highlight of our year to recognize and reward outstanding investigative journalism. It's disappointing that we could not host you and honor all this great work in person. Still, we have adapted, as we all must, and put together a celebration that we hope captures the spirit of the awards. We are delighted you could join us from wherever you are. Our program will be slightly different from past years. In an effort at brevity, let's face it, we're all zoomed out, we have decided to do without a high-profile media guest this year. But we will spend a few minutes with Richard Driehaus to ask him about his interest in investigative journalism and why he has sponsored these awards for nearly 15 years. We also are introducing a new Reader's Choice Award to our program. The strange and unsettling circumstances we find ourselves in today serve to highlight the critical importance of the investigative journalism that we are honoring. A killer virus has brought unprecedented government intervention in our lives. We've seen the largest protests and civil unrest in at least 60 years. Stories of police abuse, structural discrimination, and ravaging inequality sear our consciousness. Norms are being broken and trusted institutions are failing us. And it's all happening at a time when the profession of journalism is under siege, with the industry shedding jobs and the fake news phenomenon undermining our credibility. Today, more than ever, we need truth-telling, transparency, and accountability. The BGA is in this fight with our own investigative journalism and with advocacy that defends the basic tools of journalism. We have fought for open records and open meetings, even suing the city of Chicago to demand that even so-called informational meetings via Zoom are open to the public. Our times demand that we fight to protect the rights of journalists to do their jobs. Our times call for the skilled and tenacious reporting by the BGA and by all the peers we are honored to recognize today. I'm pleased to say that we've seen some extraordinary examples in our submissions. They include 22 entries across print, radio, TV, and online, many collaborations among news organizations, and submissions from smaller markets and news outlets, which we are very pleased to see. We hope to encourage more of this. Entries included stories of clout and self-dealing, justice denied, children harmed, and more. Reading this great material and rating the entries fell to our distinguished panel of judges. Our judges are seasoned reporters and journalists who know great investigative journalism, know our state, and have the ability to select the very best from a strong group of entries. Thank you, Laura Washington, Chris Bury, Mike Miner, Brant Houston, and Jackie Spinner for the time and effort you put into these awards. Before we present our 2020 awards, I want to thank our generous sponsor, Richard H. Driehaus, who makes it possible to honor this terrific work. Through his foundation, Mr. Driehaus has invested in efforts to preserve and enhance the built and natural environments of Chicago neighborhoods. He supports arts, culture, and opportunities for working poor people. Since 2004, he has supported the BGA's watchdog activities and sponsored these awards. For this, we are deeply grateful. Thank you, Richard. Yeah, so here we are, we're sitting by these beautiful antique cars. We're in a garage where you've got dozens of cars that you collect. You're known for collecting and supporting Gilded Age art and architecture.
Correct.
You have been a big supporter of churches and colleges.
Correct.
You've helped working people find jobs. These are your philanthropic interests.
Right.
Why is investigative journalism part of what you support philanthropically?
Because of the impact. First of all, you get a good return. Even though I'm spending the money, the return is high. So looking at return on your investment is probably one of the best benefits that I get out of it. I mean, I can spend other money in other areas, but the returns aren't as good. They might look good and stuff, but it's the public good is not necessarily served so well. So serving in investigative journalism, you get great return. for your relatively small investment.
Well, and what you were talking about earlier in spending money well, what you're saying is
Yeah.
the investment in journalism,
Well,
because of the outsized impact it has,
Yes,
is a good investment for
Yeah,
you.
it's a very good investment, actually. I'm
Right.
surprised more people aren't doing it.
Right.
You get great impact, and I think it's terrific.
Right. The business model of journalism, as you know, has fallen apart, and
Yes, correct.
nonprofit news organizations are rising.
Correct.
And
Like
they're-
ProPublica.
Right. ProPublica, the BGA,
Yeah,
even
right.
WBEZ is a
well, that's right.
nonprofit.
Yeah, correct.
As a philanthropist who supports news organizations, do you feel that they're going to at some point figure out a new business model, or do you think philanthropy is going to be
I think
the
philanthropy.
answer?
I think philanthropy is going to come in, because it's hard to get businesses to come in because they could be exposed in some way, or they're too vulnerable. So, no, I think it's the a way to go, really, for journalism.
And you said, as you say, if you look at it as an investment, you think you're getting a good return on your investment.
Right.
Then, as a philanthropist, it
Right.
makes sense. I
Yes,
guess.
it does.
Right.
Solely.
Right. Question for you: the journalists who we're recognizing tonight, they spend weeks and months on their stories.
Right.
It's lonely work. They're digging through databases. They're digging up old records. They're interviewing people, tracking people down. What do you want to say to the people who we're recognizing tonight for the work that they've done?
Oh, you would thank them. I mean, you can't thank them enough. They're doing it for the good. They're internally driven people, and not showmen.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you for everything you do for journalism. It's really great.
Thanks, Dave. I'm glad that you and your team is doing it. I mean, it's a big deal.
Now, without further ado, let's take a look at our 5 finalists.
Truth revealed. ProPublica and WBEZ uncover Illinois' bad bet.
In 2009, Illinois state lawmakers placed a big bet. It was the depths of the Great Recession. They wanted to bring some good news, and they needed money to do it. So they legalized video slot and poker machines across the state, claiming the industry would generate hundreds of millions of dollars a year to fund a $31 billion building program that would put people back to work. A decade later, our investigation found that Illinois had 30,000 video gambling machines across the state and more locations to place a bet than Nevada, yet the money lawmakers had counted on failed to materialize. The social costs associated with gambling, meanwhile, was left unattended. Despite the growth in video gambling, revenue going to addiction services had actually fallen between 2009 and 2019. Meanwhile, a handful of industry insiders became multimillionaires, and lawmakers were able to tap a new pool of campaign cash for election season. Our investigation was published in the run-up to another massive gambling expansion. This one created 6 new casinos, expanded video gambling even further, and legalized sports gambling, among other things. At heart, our stories were a cautionary tale about the dangers of relying on discretionary spending and vice industries to fund government. And it would prove prescient as the coronavirus swept across the country and shuttered every gambling location in the state of Illinois, drying up any revenue they may have created.
WBEZ reports, Power Players, clout at ComEd.
Power Players is WBEZ's year-long investigation into the connections between the state's biggest power company and some of its most powerful political figures. After a broad daylight federal raid at the Illinois Capitol last September, we put 3 experienced reporters on the story and aggressively pursued it, even in the courts. Our lawsuit against the state Senate revealed the feds were investigating scores of individuals and companies, including executives at ComEd's parent company. We then broke the story of the federal raid at one of Chicago's most venerable civic institutions, the City Club. We were the first news outlet to report that federal prosecutors were investigating whether ComEd hired politically connected contractors, some with ties to House Speaker Michael Madigan, in order to win favorable government actions in Springfield and even rate increases. Using federal and state records, we showed ComEd's long-running pattern of hiring politically connected contractors with ratepayer money. A public records request yielded the now infamous email in which a Madigan confidant and ComEd lobbyist referred to a, quote, rape in Champaign and ghost payrolling. We tracked that lobbyist to a steakhouse in downtown Chicago, where we scored an exclusive interview with the figure at the center of the probe.
But I mean, it would be hard to betray someone like Mike Madigan.
It'd be hard to betray myself.
Following WBEZ's groundbreaking work on this story, ComEd parted ways with many of its top lobbyists and executives, and our investigation has affected the direction of the probe. WBEZ continues to dominate this important story, and we thank the Driehaus Awards Committee for considering our submission.
We've got the scoop. ProPublica and Tribune reveal quiet rooms.
Our work on the quiet rooms began with data. We were interested to look at the numbers of times that public schools in Illinois were using seclusion and restraint, and the federal government had kept some older data. When we looked at that data, we were surprised to see that the numbers were as high as they were, because from what we knew about the state of Illinois, there was a law that regulated and tightly restricted the use of seclusion and restraint. So we set about to try to find out for ourselves how often schools were using seclusion and restraint and why.
So once we received all of the records from school districts across the state, we had about 50,000 pages in documents. So we decided to create a database to get a better understanding of how systemic the use of this practice was. So we logged each incident of seclusion and physical restraint into a spreadsheet, which amounted to just over 30,000 uses of these practices in about a school year and a half. So the spreadsheet included the school district, the incident date, demographic data about the student if it was available, as well as the length of time that students were being placed in seclusion or physically restrained. We also documented the reasons staff listed for why they had used these methods. The state of Illinois at that time had a law that said these practices could only be used if the student was a safety threat to themselves or someone else. And in total for this story, we interviewed more than 120 people across Illinois and across the country. And we talked to experts, advocates, school employees, and most importantly, students and their parents.
The day after the first story published, Governor J.B. Pritzker and school officials announced an immediate emergency ban on seclusion and floor restraints in Illinois schools. They also announced that there would be state oversight of the practices for the first time. Schools are now required to report every incident of seclusion and restraint to the State Board of Education within 48 hours. So school staff are required to have annual training that includes strategies for de-escalation. Some of the emergency provisions have been relaxed since then. Under pressure from some private schools, prone restraint will be allowed through next school year. And while locked seclusion remains banned through state rules, a state law did not pass this legislative session, which was condensed due to COVID-19. Legislators have vowed to bring the bill back this fall. While there had been a law for 20 years that limited the reasons isolated timeout and restraint could be used, there was no oversight of the practices. Our investigation found that schools repeatedly used these practices in ways that violated the law. We heard from many people after the stories published who said they were shocked that such practices existed, or who also said, "Thank you for bringing this to light." Kids were getting hurt, and our stories brought about awareness and change. We're so grateful that people read the stories and paid attention to the problems.
Get the story here. ProPublica reports families torn apart by state.
At the end of 2018, Dua and I both heard the same unusual tip. A Guatemalan man living in Chicago had been fighting what seemed a losing custody battle with the state over his kids, who'd been placed in foster care after they were born with drugs in their system.
The foster parents didn't raise the children to speak Spanish, the father's primary language, or even English at home. They spoke Slovak. That meant that their father, Jorge Matias, couldn't understand his son's first words, and as his son grew, he was unable to communicate or bond with him.
As we learned what happened to Jorge and his family, we also became aware of a broader systemic problem at the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services. For decades, the agency had failed to comply with the federal consent decree that required it to place the children of Spanish-speaking parents in foster homes where Spanish is spoken. The agency also failed to provide bilingual social workers and other services to those families.
DCFS is charged with protecting children in its care, but we found that language barriers and other shortcomings in serving Spanish-speaking families led to flawed investigations, including at least 3 where children died.
The story took about 6 months to report and required extensive public records requests to DCFS, an agency that repeatedly failed to give us what they were supposed to. We ultimately got thousands of records. What's more, a county judge ruled at one point that we could not publish demographic information about the families, and that would have made it impossible for us to tell our story. We ultimately won the right to do so.
The investigation led to a commitment from DCFS to hire more bilingual staff, recruit more bilingual foster families, and better track placements of children who needed Spanish-speaking foster homes. As for Jorge, he was deported during the custody battle. He remains in Guatemala, where he talks to his children on Facebook video calls.
Exclusive to us, WBBM TV's Unwarranted. Police raids gone wrong.
It would have taken one slip of your finger and my children would not be here.
We don't want to see that happen. We don't want to erode the trust with the community.
Now, for the first time, Chicago police are talking about the disturbing trend the CBS 2 investigators exposed, which includes more than 23 children who say police pointed guns at them during wrong raids.
Where did they point the gun at you?
I wanted to like right here, but like straight at it.
Where did they point the rifle?
It was like around.
They pointed a gun at me.
When you saw some of the stories, what did you feel for some of these kids?
Based on the way that the footage was, you felt bad for them.
Chicago Police Lieutenant Matthew Klein and Risk Manager Michelle Morris.
Let's be clear, no child should have a gun pointed in his face.
They say the department is now adding training for officers to deal with children and creating a new search warrant policy aimed at protecting kids from trauma during raids.
How are you going to deal with children?
We're making sure that if we know children to be present, that in our operational planning, that it's discussed that there's going to be children in here.
What good is the plan if the officer, the affiant who's getting the warrant, hasn't independently verified, double-checked and triple-checked the informant's information to make sure you're actually going into the right apartment or the right home?
Are there some that are not being done to the standards that we have? Absolutely, and that's being addressed.
Lieutenant Klein says there will be more oversight of the search warrant approval process, including a requirement mandating all officers run the proper public record checks through their information center at police headquarters to make sure they are raiding the right addresses.
Things fell through the cracks and they didn't realize that that was the proper way to obtain this information.
Repeated failures to get addresses right, leaving behind a trail of trauma.
Just the saddest moment.
And still, the city is refusing to track these wrong raids, covering up just how big the problem really is. The little bit of data the CBS 2 investigators forced the city to release shows since 2016, police executed 6,800 search warrants. In nearly 3,000 cases, not a single arrest was made. We can't tell you how many of those 3,000 were wrong raids because tonight, even with the new policy in place, they admit they still have no method to track these kinds of wrong raids.
Because you couldn't be with us this year, we wanted to give you a chance to get involved in the spirit of these awards. So for the first time, we are presenting a Reader's Choice Award with a $1,000 prize. We announced the finalists about a week ago and invited you all to vote for your favorite. So we'll kick off the presentation of the 2020 awards with the winner you picked. I am delighted to present the 2020 Reader's Choice Award to The Quiet Rooms by Jennifer Smith Richards, Chicago Tribune, Jody S. Cohen, and Lakedra Chavez of ProPublica, Illinois.
Good afternoon, David and our viewers. It's my pleasure to announce the winners of the 2020 Richard H. Driehaus Foundation Investigative Journalism Awards. First, let me join David and the BGA in thanking you for joining us for this virtual presentation. These strange times make it more important than ever that journalists keep the investigative spotlight trained on those in power. The BGA and the Richard H. Driehaus Foundation established awards in 2004. In the intervening 16 years, we've received more than 400 submissions and honored more than 90 investigations. It is a privilege to recognize the value of this kind of journalism. I am delighted you tuned in to support and celebrate this work. Now, it's time for the part you've been waiting for. The third place prize of $3,000 goes to a story that began a decade ago when Illinois lawmakers legalized video gambling, saying it would generate billions of dollars for the state. Instead, revenues fell behind projections. Illinois has struggled to regulate the industry, and video gambling companies have reaped hundreds of millions of dollars in profits. At the same time, problem gambling is a big issue. The bad bet, uncovered and brought to light, the price Illinois citizens have paid for the state's unprecedented investment in video gambling.
Congratulations to Jason Grotto of ProPublica, Illinois, Dan Mihalopoulos of WBEZ Public Radio, and Sandhya Kamba Hampati of ProPublica, Illinois.
Home is where we feel safest. But what happens when it's wrongly rated by police? The second place prize of $7,000 goes to a team who exposed a pattern of Chicago police raiding the wrong homes, pointing guns at children and violating the constitutional right against search and seizure.
Congratulations to WBBM TV and the team of Dave Savini, Michelle Youngerman, Suma Assad, Rebecca McCann, DeAndre Taylor, and Mike Klingilly for their exposé titled Unwarranted Wrong Raids.
Finally, the first place award of $15,000 goes to an investigation exposing how Illinois schools put special education students in seclusion rooms or physically restrained them for unlawful reasons, sparking swift government reforms. The spaces have gentle names like the Reflection Room, but shut inside them, school children as young as 5 wail for their parents, scream in anger, and beg to be let out.
Congratulations to Jennifer Smith Richards of the Chicago Tribune and Jody S. Cohen and Lakidra Chavez of ProPublica, Illinois, for their collaboration titled The Quiet Rooms.
We'd like to thank the Better Government Association and the Richard H. Driehaus Foundation for your continued support of investigative journalism in Illinois. This type of reporting is imperative not just in our state, but across the country, and it takes a lot of resources to make it happen. So thank you so much for this honor. We really thank you.
Because this was a newsroom collaboration, we had 4 editors who shepherded this project from beginning to end. Louise Kiernan, George Papajohn, Steve Mills, and Karin Tissue, we thank you so much. We were also fortunate to have a wonderful photographer work with us, Zabig Bizdeck, and an incredibly talented visual and presentation staff at both organizations who worked together seamlessly. This project was more than the 3 of us. There were so many people, and we are grateful for everybody who worked with us. At a time when collaboration is more important than ever, this investigation really illustrates the power of collaboration from beginning to end and shows what can be accomplished when media organizations work together.
Most importantly, we'd like to thank the people who were strong enough to speak out and tell us their own experiences with seclusion and restraint, in particular to the children and their families who invited us into their living rooms, who talked to us on the phone, who shared so much of their lives with us. The story is nothing without you, and you helped expose this issue to so many people who didn't understand that it even existed. And children are going to be safer as a result of your voices. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard, and congratulations once again to all of our winners. Thanks to all the reporters who fight for transparency and accountability, the goals the BJA strives to achieve in government. Thanks to all of you who support the fight for truth-telling, fairness, and equity. By participating tonight, you are joining us in supporting great investigative journalism. I hope you'll consider supporting the BJA's investigative journalism and policy advocacy by contributing to support our work. You can give online at donate.bettergov.org or become a member of the BJA and demand better from our government at membership.bettergov.org. I want to leave you with this parting thought. In recent weeks, we all have been reminded of stark inequalities in our society. In today's media landscape, there are gaps and news deserts that leave communities without information and without a voice in governance. The BJA is committed to addressing those inequalities and developing more diverse perspectives within our own organization and in the communities we serve. We are doubling down on our efforts to hold government accountable and demand transparency, especially in communities overlooked and underserved by government. The work we have honored here today does just that. All those who submitted entries in this year's Driehaus Awards have held government accountable and defended those who cannot defend themselves. At the BJA, we are proud to join them as colleagues in the fight for accountability and transparency. Today, more than ever, we all need to speak truth to power. Thank you all for joining us today and for being a part of this important work.
Here's another BGA exclusive.
The Richard H. Driehaus Awards for Investigative Reporting will return in 2021.
Take that downtown and print it.